have township meetings. It's been on Facebook. It was in the newspaper. You know, and then we try to get there's a lot of people here. I know we have a couple from Thornridge and from the Moon Drive area, Penwood Crossing. So we're going to get hopefully a good idea of some of the things that PECO is working on planning. I want to thank Ted Durant for being here with a couple of his people. We're going to kind of let them start off, just maybe explaining things they're going to do, and then we definitely want to allow for comments and questions. This is being videotaped, so we can broadcast it, you know, to people. So to keep that in mind, as with our meetings, when he comes to microphone, you're not supposed to be using a microphone. Okay. When you come to the microphone, just make sure that you identify yourself. It's on. Okay. Make sure you identify yourself with your name, and that way everybody gets to know where you're from and what your concern is. So you got to use this too, Ted. There you are.
Thanks very much. I appreciate you folks coming out. Wanted to start off and let you know who's here. My name is Ted Duran. I'm PECO's External Affairs Manager here in Bucks County. With me this evening is Steve Singh. Steve is our Director of Operations for the Bucksmont region, which is both Bucks County and Montgomery County, and Steve manages all the operations, so he's in charge of all field forces and all the work that gets accomplished here electrically, and also has input into gas operations as well. So Steve is here this evening, and whatever work gets accomplished here in Bucks County is under Steve's direction, and the field forces and contract crews ultimately are Steve's responsibility. And as Steve likes to tell me, he owns the customers, so that's part of his job as well. Also, I have Greg Smore here this evening. Greg is with PECO Communications. If there are any people here from the media, certainly want to hook you up with Greg, and Greg will be able to supplement anything that we have to say and fill in the blanks for us as we move along. One of the things that I did want to point out is that we did have a series of meetings that we've held in different locations coming out of the ice storm and the subsequent work that occurred and storm experience that we had through the spring and summer. We did have a meeting in September up at the Penwood Middle School, and that was an open house format. And we did extend information here to the township, so don't know if any of you had an opportunity to come up there to that meeting or not, but we had an open house format, and we had boards, a few more boards than I brought here with me this evening that explained information about the experiences that customers have had related to outages and some of the work that we're going to be doing subsequent to that. And we also had a session with municipal officials a little bit before that that we invited township representatives to if they could make it. That was during the day, and we recognize that that can sometimes be tough for people who have regular jobs and can't get there. But nevertheless, we're trying to provide some information out to the public. So really what I want to do this evening, what we would like to do this evening is sort of give you a mini open house in some senses of the word, so that you get an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what we are doing here coming out of the ice storm and some of our approaches to electric reliability. We'll certainly take questions, and also want to have you folks have the opportunity to come up to the boards and talk to us individually if you'd like to do that, answer questions. We know sometimes people don't like to speak in front of other people. However it works for you, we're here to do that over the next hour or so. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and Steve's going to talk a little bit about some of what we've experienced and provide some background information on the experience that we've had dealing with some of the storms and some of our efforts related to work that we do on a day-to-day basis to keep the system going, and also work that we're going to be doing subsequent to coming out of our open houses and so forth. So Steve.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you everybody for coming today. So as Ted mentioned, I'm the director for the Bucksmont region. So what that means is anything that happens electrically or with natural gas in Bucks and Montgomery County is ultimately my responsibility. PECO is divided into 3 regions. There's also a Delchester region and a Philadelphia region. So I essentially have responsibility for 1/3 of the operations at PECO. Our primary responsibility is to keep the lights on and the gas flowing. We take that very seriously, and that's something we're constantly looking at to evaluate and to improve on. And I say that, and I know that 2014 has been a really tough year. It's been a really challenging year for us, and I'm sure it's been a really challenging year for you as well. This year, we've had 3 storms that have knocked out more than 10% of our total customer base. That has never happened to us before in the history of PECO. And when you look back, even a few years before that with Sandy or Irene or some of the other ice storms that took place around Halloween and some of the severe weather, we're looking at our system and we're constantly evaluating it, and we're noticing some differences in the weather pattern and how it's impacting our system and our infrastructure. So ultimately what I want to share with you today is, as a result of all of these changes that are occurring, what are some actions that we're taking to adjust? We understand we just can't sit back on our heels and say, it's the weather, there's nothing we can do about it. The weather is a factor, and we're making plans here to adjust and to change and to improve system reliability. But before I get into some of the enhancements, I want folks to know is that we do take this very seriously and always have. On an annual basis, we spend over $500 million every year in maintenance of our system and ensuring that we keep our system uptake, that we protect the system, and that we're constantly monitoring it. We have 2,300 circuits that we have at PECO. We inspect every single one of them every year. So every year we have a preventative maintenance program that goes around and looks at all of these circuits, and we identify them, literally walk them down and try to proactively identify if there's any issues there. We also spend $35 million a year on vegetation management. Because when you look at the outages, one of the primary causes of our outages is vegetation. You know, when a tree falls on a wire on a piece of equipment, that generally creates an outage. And this is the path that we've been taking now for quite some time, investing a lot of money into our system, walking down all of our circuits, doing tons of preventative maintenance. And some of the results that we were managing is that our corrective maintenance backlogs. Those are the items that we find once we walk down a circuit. If we find something that's a defect out there, we throw that in our backlog. Our backlogs are at an all-time low. And actually, when you look at it all the way to 2013, the reliability of our systems was greatly improving. It was actually a really positive trend in terms of, if you look at our reliability from 10 years ago, every year essentially our reliability was improving. And then came 2014, and things are starting to get a little bit worse here in terms of the reliability we've experienced year to date. One of the major things we had this year was the ice storm. So we had the ice storm, and that was the second worst storm we've had in the history of PECO. In a lot of ways, that storm was a lot worse for us than Sandy was. Sandy was the largest storm we ever had in our history, but the ice storm in many ways was worse. First of all, with Sandy, we had a lot of time to prepare. Most of the East Coast did. We saw that thing coming for about a few weeks. We had crews mobilized here. We had a lot of people ready to go. We were staffed up. We were ready to roll when Sandy came. The February storm was different. If you look at the weather forecast all the way up to that, we were prepared, but nobody expected that ice line to really just devastate us in this area. That ice line impacted us, and it impacted us in this territory very severely. After that ice storm, we had a series of open house meetings where we talked to many customers. We reached out to many folks, and we're listening to them. I was at every single one of them here for the Bucksmont region. And many of the customers I'd talk to face, they come up to me, and they would tell me, I hear what you're saying, that your reliability generally is really good, but I'm suffering. I'm in this area that continues to go out multiple times. And you can tell me your reliability is really good and improving, but that's not the experience that I'm seeing. So we concluded many of those town hall sessions, and one of the things we did when we went back and we took down the addresses of the customers that were there at the open houses, and then we went back and did an analysis of our entire system. Because I know every outage that takes place on our system for the last 5 years. So we went back and looked at it a different way and said, okay, we have these customers that are telling us that they're experiencing multiple interruptions. Let's go back and look at it and plot it. So I wanted to see an analysis of all the outage that we've had, and were there in fact pockets of customers that were suffering. And one of the areas that we found is that we did identify pockets that we needed to address. while generally our safety is the way that we measure reliability was greatly improving, there were still a lot of areas where we needed to focus on and improve. So what we did specifically in this area and in this region, we identified those areas where there were customers experiencing multiple interruptions, and we've identified work and have already started to execute that work and are in the process of continuing to do so to make a really big change here in this area and in this region. So at a high level, what we're doing is we're investing about $10 million on top of the money that we already spent to specifically focus and address those areas where the customers were providing us feedback. The map of work, and I'm sure you can't see it from where you're sitting, but if you want to come up and take a look at it, what you'll notice on this map is that these green boxes are the specific areas and locations where we're performing work. We met with a lot of our municipal officials, elected officials, and shared with them this plan as well. So these boxes are where we're performing the work, but I want to make it clear when you come up and take a look at this, that that's not what's being affected. So a little box, it looks like it's right here, this piece of work will address a very large radius of customers in terms of improving their experience. So this work, as I sat down with my engineering team and all the way up to our CEO on a weekly basis, we said, we believe that this work is going to make a really positive difference in terms of reliability for this entire region. So, that's what we see. And another thing that we're going to be doing, if this in fact is not effective or as effective as we suspect, we're going to continue to monitor and evaluate our programs continuously to make sure we get to the right place. So that's essentially the story we wanted to share with you, tell you about the plans we're working through. And I guess at this point, I wanted to open up for any questions.
Yeah, before we do that, I just wanted to point out to folks that I know we've got, sorry, I keep forgetting. Before we open it up to questions, I did want to acknowledge the fact that we did get input from the township here. I know that Rich Rich DiPolito posted in the township, posted up on Facebook to get information from areas where customers were experiencing reliability problems, and many of you sent your addresses in, and we used that information along with the information that we had already put together from our analysis to look at areas where we needed to address issues. And I know there are people here from Thorn Ridge and a few other neighborhoods, and I want to assure you that those neighborhoods are part of the work that we're doing. We've actually started to do some of that work already. We're doing some vegetation management work because, as Steve mentioned, trees falling on wires is a huge issue for us in terms of what affects customers and their electricity and their reliability. So we've started to do some vegetation management in the area, and then we're going to be doing some electric work. And as Steve mentioned, that work has already begun to some degree, and we're going to stick with it and continue to work through, most likely through the end of May of next year. We want to get everything, all the work completed so that we're ready to come into the summer months with all the work that we wanted to accomplish. So if you haven't seen the trucks, you will see the trucks, and you will see the vegetation management crews in the area doing work. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody has. I'd like to try to keep it as informal as we can. We're here hopefully to help you through this and get information from you, and don't feel that this has to be a formal thing just because we're dealing with microphones.
Yeah, and again, obviously the crowd isn't so big and the room's not so big that we can't hear each other, but we do want to make sure people watching this at home, when it is replayed, are able to hear what you're saying and what the answers are. So there is a smaller handheld wand mic here for you guys. We can put this one back up for the speakers, and then that way you'll be able to answer on microphone so we can pick it up.
The other thing I'm going to do, I have a one-page summary that I'll ask Greg to pass out. It provides sort of a broad brush overview of the level of effort that we're going to be doing in this area and throughout this part of Bucks County. So anybody have any questions?
First come, first served, we're going.
Yeah, we're supposed to have.
Hi, man. How are you? My name's Bill Wilcox. I'm the chief of police with the police department. I apologize for my mode address. I just came from the Poconos. I'm here together with that nicely dressed man in the back, Lieutenant Airy. We're here tonight to ask you, gentlemen, if there's anything the police department can do to assist you either during times of crisis or in preparedness for that, or anything that we can do that we're not doing.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's appropriate for us to acknowledge what you do for us during storms and what the police do, what the emergency responders do. And one thing that would be helpful to us is make sure, and I believe you already know this, but to make sure that we've got open lines of communication so that when we're in the storm mode, you gentlemen, whether you're the fire marshal, the chief of police, a patrolman, or whatever the case may be, know the pathway to communicate with us. One of the things that we did coming out of Hurricane Sandy, actually the effort began in Hurricane Irene. I made some forays into the emergency response community. I attended a couple of county firefighter association meetings at different points in time. And one of the things that it was made clear to us back as far as Hurricane Irene was that we needed to help the local responders in terms of responding to wires down. And so that emergency response personnel didn't have to sit our wires, because if they had to sit our equipment, they couldn't respond to other things. So we began an effort right then and there, and we got some practice towards the tail end of Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee, got a little bit more practice on Sandy, unfortunately, and then got some more practice in Hurricane Irene, or I'm sorry, the ice storm. So one thing that we put in place in the county with the cooperation of the emergency management services there and Scott Forster was a better road closure procedure so that we could respond faster and more quickly to road closures. So we asked them to help us with a prioritization of roads so that we could address those roads that were critical to keep open for the passage of emergency response vehicles, fire trucks, police vehicles, and the like, and then work our way through the road closure process to get the roads open. And I'll tell you that in the ice storm, we opened almost 80% more roads more quickly than we did in Sandy. So that tells us that, that we're doing a good job. I already communicate with Rich a lot during emergency situations. I'm sort of a backstop, if you will, in the storm effort. Everybody has a storm role. Steve has a storm role. He's in the command center and so forth. So
I would be remiss. He's the point guy. He does it all.
Right.
And you know what?
But you know.
And we back him up.
Absolutely.
But I'm just here to tell you, you know, we're here to help you.
Yeah.
Whatever we can do to help you.
You know,
but
we
he's really
appreciate
the
it.
point man, and he points us in the right direction.
Yeah, no, and yeah, no, yeah. Everybody, you know, it sounds like we're giving each other compliments, and really we are, because I think one of the things that we built here over the last 10 years is a better way to communicate with one another, and I'm hoping you folks on your side feel the same way. And if there's anything that we need to do to improve, we want to know about it. So, so appreciate that. Anybody else?
Nobody's gonna talk, I'll talk.
Sure.
Al Wilson, Moon Drive.
Hi, Al.
Great place to live during an air raid, because we're the first to have the lights go out and the last to have them come on.
All right.
Okay, I've been there 45 years.
Yeah.
Okay, 25 years ago, someone came and spoke about putting a switch in so that when the power did go out, they'd be able to switch over.
Mm-hmm.
And we've lost it for numerous days, over and over.
Okay.
It seems more like you're a reactive company than a proactive company, because if you were to ride up here just a mile up the road, you'll see a pole with a transformer leaning in front of the Exxon station, it's almost bent out into the highway.
Okay.
Now, when you call companies in from Alabama, Ohio, that has to be a humongous cost to you.
Right.
Wouldn't that money be better spent trimming the trees back prior to the storms instead of waiting until you get your ice storms and the weather changes?
Well, to answer your question, we do a lot of that proactive trimming. And we're
I
gonna,
see ash blend trucks
right,
occasionally.
right.
45 years, it's the first time they trimmed the trees over by the substation on Old Tiber.
Okay,
Very first time,
okay.
okay? And the other question that I have for you is, I heard that the fellows that come out of state, say from Alabama, North Carolina, wherever they come from, they work on a different voltage and they have different safety equipment than you have, and you guys have to train them before they can go out to do the repairs.
So in the electric industry, there's a title called a journeyman, so a journeyman line mechanic. So they are trained, they're fully trained to work on our systems. There's a couple nuances we have different with lockout, tagout, but they're pretty minor. When we bring in these contractors, and we bring them in, and I'm right there with them when we bring them in, they come in, we give them a safety brief, let them know about some of the differences they may be experiencing here at PECO, tell them a couple of the nuances difference, and within an hour, they're out of the road.
But their safety equipment, their gloves and everything is on par with you?
All of their equipment has to be compliant with OSHA. OSHA is the federal regulations from OSHA. They have to be compliant. Now, there are some differences. In a lot of cases, PECO goes above and beyond OSHA requirements. So we recognize OSHA requirements, we meet every one of them, and we go in above and beyond. Some of the journeymen, they don't go above and beyond. They'll meet, and they have to meet the OSHA requirements. So there are some differences, and we explain to them how we work here at PECO. We get that done generally in about an hour.
Because there was an article saying that you guys have to have a training prior to sending them out on the line.
It's about an hour.
That's it?
Yeah, I bring them in, I meet with them, shake their hands, welcome to PECO. I have a safety professional that's right there. He performs a briefing, and within an hour, they're on the road. So that is true that we do an education with them, but it's not qualifying them or training them. They already come to us fully qualified and compliant with OSHA regulations.
And on your map there, I'm looking at the end of what would be Moon Drive, and you have a substation there. And the only thing that I've seen, and you explained that it could be another area that is upgrading, is tree trimming in that area.
Yep.
But what are you doing as far as a power outage? Because the area that I'm in is always out. The first to go out, the last to come on. Across the street in Old Fosington, the lights seem to stay on forever. Down in Nottingham, where
well, and like I mentioned, and thank you for that, and that's a lot of the feedback we got. So we are addressing you. So if you really are going out that many times, as you're saying, which was certainly believed, we are addressing those pockets of customers that have been experiencing those issues. So whether it's through enhanced tree trimming, we're doing a lot of enhanced tree trimming where we're doing very aggressive tree trimming. We have our standard, and in these cases, we're doing more aggressive. We're putting in new tree-resistant wire. It's kind of like a Hendrix tree wire. We're putting in new equipment. We're doing all kinds of things. And one of the things I wanted to caution, because a lot of times people come up to this map and it doesn't look like there's something right there in front of my house. Our systems are so interconnected that if we do this block of work here, it'll have a very broad impact. And I specifically made sure that the work that we're doing here will have that broad impact for that customer base.
well, you have an easement alongside your poles, is that correct?
Yes.
Why don't you work with the towns to have some kind of ordinance passed that you can't have trees within so many feet of your wires? Because you never see one of those big towers come down where the power's on, but you never see a tree within 200 feet of either side of it.
Well, we have rights of way. We have rights of way, and we stay within the rights of way. And with with development that has occurred, we do have a program that we call Right Tree in the Right Place. So we have been starting to work with townships to provide them with information about distances that trees should be planted away from power lines going forward, different species of trees that can be planted that don't grow tall enough to impact. But one of the issues that you have in older communities like this community that was built starting in the 50s is that you have trees that were built, you have developers when these subdivisions were built, they came to us and told us how they wanted those communities served electrically. So many of them are served from the rear, and as opposed to not having the lines out on the street where they could be seen. It was thought to be more pleasing to have a street that didn't have utility lines visible on it. So a lot of neighborhoods that you see in the Levittown areas of all the 5 municipalities that make up Levittown is that you have a lot of rear property utility lines. So what has happened over the course of time is that people have planted trees in their backyards, and some of those trees, even though they might be 30, 40 feet away from the power line in the backyard, they grow to 100 feet tall. They're 50, 60 years old at this point, so they're starting to disease and decay. So what happens is over the course of time is that, they sustain, damage, they start to get brittle. Some of them are pine trees and they don't stand up real well to snows and ice. And so that's kind of what you get. But in the future, we're hoping with some of our efforts, I think you raise a good point, that we need to, try to help communities to get through that. One other thing that I think has been really helpful is that there are places where we decide to that we should remove a tree. We believe that it presents a threat to the lines, but it's outside of the area that we have a right to trim. It's in someone's yard. So we have to go one-on-one to each customer and ask them for permission to either trim the tree or remove the tree. And the townships have actually helped us in many situations because they have the relationships with their residents.
I think if anybody's experienced a power outage, they wouldn't be opposed to having that tree trimmed.
You'd be surprised.
Well,
You'd be surprised.
Another problem is fences on the easement, sheds that have been built in the easement over years,
yeah,
things like that.
but if they have to get in there to put a pole or put a wire in, they still got to access that area.
Yeah, and we do get in there. We have equipment. We have equipment that we can use to get
How
in.
about these poles that you see leaning like this one I just spoke of up the street with a transformer on it that's there?
Well,
there's another one down on Oxford Valley Road that's it's been that way for.
We can take those individual locations. There is a certain amount of lean that does occur with our equipment, so it may seem not directly perpendicular to you, and then there are some that lean more, and certainly we want to identify those, and we'll take a look at them.
But now I want to go back to Moon Drive where someone talked about a switch, that if the power went out, they could switch it over.
Right.
And that was 20, 25 years ago. No one ever came back. And the other thing I want to ask you is about when you turn it back on, it seems to surge.
Right.
You'll get a surge and it'll come right off and then it'll go right back on. And that fries a lot of electronic stuff.
Yeah, and we try to provide some information out to customers about what to do when the power goes off, to shut their appliances down. Sometimes we suggest they flip breakers and do some other things to protect the inside of their homes. Try to minimize that as much as possible from occurring.
And then you mentioned about the leaning pole. So we can get the address from you. We can take a specific look at that. But one of the things that we do, like I mentioned, we walk down every circuit, all the miles of the circuits every year. We identify issues like that, like leaning poles. And as Ted mentioned, there is a certain amount of lean that's acceptable, but we prioritize that work. If there's something that has started leaning more since we did our patrol, we definitely want to know about that, and we'll go take a look at it and make sure it's the right priority. We have different priorities on our work. Some are emergent, and some, will get done within a few weeks. So if this is one that has started leaning more since we inspected it, I'd love to get that address, and we can.
What is your degree of lean that you allow?
Well, it depends on what the weight's on it. So all the configuration, it depends. It doesn't have a transformer on it. How many cross arms are on it? So the short answer is it depends, but we have our experts and our foremen go and take a look at these segments of pole. So we'll get that address from you when the meeting's concluded, and we'll take a look at it.
I'm worried about Moon Drive. That's
okay. Moon Drive.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I live in Thornridge, so actually I'm going to make more of a comment than ask you questions. when I say, why is PECO undertaking a $10 million improvement plan that includes advanced equipment upgrades, 24 pieces of equipment to help isolate outages and restore power more quickly, a substation transformer, upgrades to adjacent transformer, add 17,700 feet of aerial wire, 8,300 of it, which is tree-resistant wire, and do additional tree trimming removal along 43 miles of area, 43 miles. Well, I read your summer readiness overview for 2014. Why you would have to go 43 miles indicates to me that you haven't done anything to this point. I think the reason why PECO is getting into this program is because you already knew why service was and is so bad, and I don't think over the years you've done anything to mitigate what I consider poor performance as a reliable electric supplier. Now, each public utility which produces, generates, distributes, or furnishes electricity, you must annually submit to the Commission information concerning future plans to meet your customer demands. Did the future plans that you submitted include any of these proposed improvements? If they didn't, why didn't they? You should have had these in motion. PECO is required to file a plan explaining their plan for inspection, maintenance, replacement, repairs of your facilities that are designed to meet your reliability performance every 2 years. Why wasn't this multi-million-dollar improvement plan submitted before now? So during the many outages that I've experienced, and they were pretty bad and often, how much and what type of equipment did you folks have on hand when we had an outage? How many PECO employees, not your subcontractors that you get on the phone and try to get crews together, did you have respond? How long was your response time? How did you prioritize your job? How did you communicate with consumers? I haven't been able to contact anyone when I pick up the phone, especially during outages, and the message I got many times was, we are trying to locate the cause of the outage, goodbye, and you hang up. That was the message I got, poor communications. I'm telling you, I don't believe that PECO meets their reliability, performance, your benchmarks, and your standards. I don't believe what you say and what you actually do is the same thing. I'm from Thornridge. You're going to make improvements. You show me. I'll tell you, I have asked our board to file a complaint to PUC to get you people to do what you're supposed to do. I did that 14 years ago when I lived on Everett Road. And I was down there at 15 and Spring Garden with one of your representatives and your attorney, and I never had a problem after I filed a complaint with the PUC. I've asked my board to do that. It's up to them whether they want to do it or not. Your vegetation program, I made a remark about that at our last meeting. I took photographs. A couple of days after I said the only thing the vegetation in my back lacked, you could have made a Tarzan movie back there. Here is the before and after. I took photographs and what it looks like now. You're an electrician, why don't you look at that? Thank you, I have nothing further to say. I will continue to come before this board and tell them to file a complaint if your service doesn't get any better. I think it's terrible service.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. First, you addressed a lot of different things there. So one of the pieces, and help me if I missed anything here, one of the pieces here was with the PUC. So we file all the reports that we need to file with the PUC. And actually, when you look at our reliability statistics, as I mentioned at the top, our reliability statistics are very strong. In fact, when we submit our information to the PUC, we're one of the best in the state. And actually, we're one of the best in the country in terms of overall reliability. So our plans that we put in place, the $500 million we spend, the $35 million we're spending on vegetation, I can understand if your experience, your local experience is different, why you may not believe that, but I will tell you, we do invest heavily in our system. We do submit the plans to the PUC. We are audited by the PUC. the PUC has accepted our plans and our proposals. Why was this piece of it? You asked the question, why was this piece of it not submitted? This piece of it wasn't submitted. This is a different enhanced program that we're putting in place that is looking specifically at pockets. So it sounds like you fall under one of those pockets of information. So this program is specifically addressed at fixing those issues. In terms of communications, so when you call in and you get a message that's telling you that we're still looking for the cause of the outage, that is, what we're doing at that time. One of our primary things we try to do when we have large-scale outages is to make sure we can get a crew on it, that somebody can actually visually put their eyes on it and identify where the issue is so that we can give our customers a proper ETR, an estimated time of restoration. We don't want to just blanketly tell you that there's a restoration time if we don't have some specific information on it. So that's one of the reasons sometimes when you call up and it says that we're still trying to figure out what the issue is, that is the honest truth. We're still trying to deploy our resources so that we can figure that out. In terms of restoration times, you talked about, so how do we perform? So in Sandy, actually, we were one of the quickest utilities that got impacted by Sandy to get our customers on. So when you kind of compare us versus how other utilities repair and respond, we were one of the best in terms of getting our customers back on by Sandy. We actually had everybody back in within a week. This ice storm was different. This ice storm literally impacted us and pretty much only us. That ice line went right through us, and we ramped up very quickly. We had a lot of contractors coming on board. We had our PECO people ready, and that was a really, really challenging storm to work through, not only because the weather conditions were so cold for our customers afterwards, but the working conditions for our workers and the contractors that we brought on were some of the worst we've ever had. After Sandy, if you recall, the weather conditions were actually very favorable to getting work done. It was sunny out. It wasn't that warm. After this ice storm, there was ice everywhere. So not only did our crews have to go and maneuver to the pieces of equipment, they had to walk through ice. The tree branches continue to fall for a week. I think some folks may forget that, is that ice storm came in on Wednesday. I'll never forget that. It came in on that Wednesday, and all throughout the entire week, the branches continued to come down as it got heavy.
I'm not only referring to Sandy and ice storms, I'm referring to when a day like today when you're sitting there and your power goes out and it takes you 2 days to get it back on. I'm not talking about ice storms and acts of God. God doesn't act that often in Thornridge. Okay. Again, appreciate your comments.
Who else, anyone else?
I live on Buck Drive, and you have I guess it comes out of your substation over there by the Fairless Hills Golf Course. Now all of our electrical lines are underground. Right. Of course, with the number of outages, you probably wouldn't believe it. But I do understand that the line comes down Queen Anne Creek behind St. Francis Cabrini. And that's a total distance of maybe a half mile, quarter mile. I don't know how many times and why it takes so long for you folks to trim that back down there if that's the case. Other than that, I mean, the things that affect us is every time somebody has an accident at South Olds Boulevard and Hood Boulevard, the lights go out here where I live. And the lights have been out, I want to say, I've lived there for about 28 years now, and in the last 10 have been probably the worst. And it seems like every year it becomes more often. I mean, I finally broke down, went out and bought a generator because I'm getting tired of bailing my basement or running a 50,000-foot extension cord to plug my sump pump in. Loss of service. But I agree with this gentleman here that it's really unacceptable at this point. And I know that you folks know that Dion Square and the ShopRite Center and the Giant Center there, they have a lot of electrical problems. And I don't know whether it's because it's the age of the station down there where this power comes through. I mean, I noticed we've had everything from angle bars falling off your poles to knock down a line to disrupt the electric. And that's only a little simple thing that probably took them a half an hour, 40 minutes, but it's 3 hours before you get out there to do it.
Well,
And this is on a nice day.
right.
And you folks, I mean, I'm not trying to bash you because hey, I have a heat pump.
Right.
I have a total electric house.
Right.
So I'm depending on you.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, the last few years, the dependencies, I mean,
Yep.
I don't know what we're supposed to do when it gets to 6 and 8 times a year.
Right.
Gasoline's expensive too for the generator.
No, you're right. And that's, you know, that's what we're looking at now is we're looking at those areas where we've got the multiple interruptions and trying to go after the causes and get that work done so that we can drive down the number of those outages and get them as close to zero. We're never going to get completely to zero, but we're going to try to keep
Well, I'm with
continuing
this
to drive
gentleman
down.
here. I will give you, I mean, an ice storm, yeah, I'll give you that. I'll give you the ice storm, I'll give you Sandy.
Sure.
I'll give you a bad winter storm, but it happens on too many nice days.
Right.
I mean, I can understand if we lived out west where they got 80-mile-an-hour winds blowing rigs off the road and everything else and trains over. I can understand they might have a little reliability problem out there. But the weather here is pretty mild, pretty nice.
Right.
In comparison to down south with some of the tornadoes and all this stuff. So your reliability should be almost 100%.
It actually is pretty close.
Well, then I don't know who's the one that's
Yeah,
keeping track.
I mean, you know, and that, and,
Keeping track of your road
and
records.
as we said in the beginning, you know, we're doing things differently now. We're looking at not only the circuit-wide experience of what it is across the entire circuit, but we're looking at the individual pockets. And that's the next step in the path for us to address
Well,
the issue.
That's a bad pocket.
Oh, okay, I appreciate it. Appreciate your comments.
Else wish to speak?
My name's Doran Johnson. I work at Penwood Crossing.
Yes, sir.
Got over 1,000 home sites there. I can say that when we do lose power, you're pretty quick on getting us back up, and I appreciate that. There was a couple issues where there was power lines coming in down along the railroad tracks, and you couldn't get access down there. Well, I was going to cut the lock, but somebody wouldn't let me. So you finally got back there and got that fixed, and appreciate it. My main thing is the tree trimming. 6 months later, you need to trim them again. And I understand you're talking about more aggressive tree trimming.
Right.
We got some trees that are this big around, they go up and they fork, and the power line's right underneath them. Take them limbs off.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Questions or?
So what I'd like to do at this point, if anybody wants to come up and take a look at the boards, that'd be great. You have any questions that you want to ask us, we'll be here for, you know, a little bit longer here. You're welcome to come up and ask us any questions, and we'll be communicating with the township, you know, throughout this period and letting them know the progress that we're making here as we work. And if there are improvements and things that we need to do that require us to take a brief outage in order to complete those, you'll be notified about that so that we can do our work safely and so that we don't have a significant impact on what you do on a day-to-day basis. But I appreciate you all coming out this evening, and we do appreciate the feedback.